Welcome to On the Prowl, Florida Panthers Round 1 recap and Round 2 preview, episode 34. Very special guest who really doesn't need any introduction, Rod Pedersen of the #1 podcast in the state of Florida, Cats and Bolts Podcast. Welcome, Rod. How are you today?
It's very nice of you, Bill. Good to see you, buddy.
And all my best to your better half as well, too. And we'll go from there. Just what I want to do today and explain to everybody, we're going to take a look back at round 1, what went well, what didn't work well, and so forth, and round 2 with Toronto. Now, one of the things that I want to say right away is, and I think, one of the greatest ever to lace him up just retired, Marc-Andre Fleury. Just an incredible human being, a great hockey player, left a legacy in Pittsburgh and extended that to Vegas and to Minnesota as well, too. But one of the things that I want to say is when he left Pittsburgh under not so good circumstances, they left him exposed for the draft, and he was picked by Vegas and really kind of helped Vegas out that year. But what I want to say is after that, the Penguins kind of were, that was after they won the 2 cups in 2016 and 2017. And it was kind of on a downward spiral since then, since he left. And case in point is, I'm going to bring that up to Tampa, all right? And a lot of people call Marc-Andre Fleury the heart and soul of the Penguins. Sidney Crosby's the best player, but Marc-Andre Fleury was the heart and the soul. He really was, emotionally, like a Matthew Tkachuk is for the Panthers. Well, Steven Stamkos was the heart and soul of the Tampa Bay Lightning. There's no questions asked, okay? Did Tampa make the right move on paper? Yes, they did. And, and the season-wise, they did. But when it came to that emotional lift that the Lightning needed, they didn't get that. And that, I think a lot of that had to do with not having Stamkos in that room. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, there's absolutely no doubt about that. And but the thing is, you and I have done these shows before. We follow each other's stuff. I said coming out of last season that the Lightning were going to regret this. And to be honest, I think they jammed it where the sun doesn't shine on me by finishing ahead of the Panthers in the regular season. And something went on there, Bill. I've got friends in the Lightning organization that don't want to talk about why Stamkos isn't there anymore. Some of the media I talked to during this recently completed series, some of the Tampa media said it was strictly a spreadsheet decision, nothing personal. It was all about money, and that Julien Brisebois will not overpay for an aging star, period. Right? Stammer's contract was up. He would have liked at least $8 million. They offered him less than half that. Let's shake hands at the end of the day. Is it that cut and dry? That's what they want us to believe. So I'm not going to dig too far into it. I think it was a mistake. The playoffs showed that it was a mistake. And as a matter of fact, you watch these games as much as I do. When they met in the playoffs in 2024, Steven Stamkos was the only guy that showed any life.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
But again, they caught fire. John Cooper addressed it on Thursday. I think it was Friday maybe, that whatever his year-end news conference was, John Cooper addressed it and said that this team came together. They outlined all the injuries. Looked like over half the team had some sort of various ailment, including Victor Hedman, who was playing on a broken leg.
Yeah.
And I look at that, Bill, and go, yeah, let's see the Panthers list of injuries. I don't see them bitching about it. Like, that's why Paul took his foot off the gas in the last month. Maybe 2 months of the regular season. And he admitted it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was so evident. And, and I said this on my podcast. I said, does Paul want, what does Paul want more for this team? Does he want a healthy team going into the playoffs, or does he want to win out the division? I said he wanted a healthy team going in the playoffs because he's been around the block more than once. He knows what it takes to win, and as obviously is evidenced last year by them winning the cup. He knows it takes a healthy team to win the cup, and that's what he went into with, okay? From the start, from the playoffs, they were a healthy team. And one of the things that I want to say before we get too far into this, okay, to me, unquestionably, the best player for the Panthers in that series was Brad Marchand. I said, and I've also come out on X, on Twitter, and it said Zito needs to do everything he can to re-sign him next year. This guy is gold. Having the 3 or 4 lines that the Panthers have, they can match up against any team in the league.
Well, there's people in Boston that think he's going to go back there, and he'd be crazy, in my opinion, if he did. Let's just remember, every player has their own set of criteria where they're going to sign. And is Brad Marchand going to go? Who's going to pay him the most money? Probably. That's what Stammer did when he signed with Nashville. Marchand was very good. He was extremely good in the clinching game 5. I thought earlier in the series, I thought he just looked old, and I was at every game. I don't know. I'm not sure there's anybody that really jumps out that was really outstanding. Sam Bennett was very good. They were all quite good. But Marchand will be, I think, 37, Bill, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I'd like to see him come back too. But they got a lot of money doled out here, and they still got to sign Sam Bennett. And if you're asking me who I would take out of those two, Bennett or Marchand, it's not even a question. Which, by the way, there's teams already making offer, like sharpening their pencil to make offers to Sam Bennett. So I like Marchand, but I just, this smacks to me just a rental again, like Kyle Okposo or Tarasenko. Yeah,
Tarasenko. This really, I mean, it parallels Tarasenko almost identically. Okay, and age and the player and everything and the skill set. I mean, it fits incredibly right into all of that. Okay, and what I thought was real interesting was with all this stuff. Now, I know you guys talked about on your podcast this week, which was really good, about the whole deal with Matthew Tkachuk and everything. And I don't disagree with anything that you said. And one of the things that I did was I took a step back and I went to look to see about his dad and Keith Tkachuk and the time that he was in the NHL and how he played the game. Of course, it was different back in the day when he was playing versus now. But one of the things that really kind of stood out to me about that was, Keith Tkachuk was a real net presence kind of guy. Okay. He was there. He was in your face kind of a thing. And I think the apple didn't fall too far from the tree with Matthew. Okay. I think they're more alike than Brady is like his dad. Okay. With all that being said, okay. And I agree with you. Matthew Tkachuk, while he doesn't break all the rules, he really kind of bends them, okay, and up to a certain point, and maybe just dipping his toe where it shouldn't be.
Well, I don't know why he gets away with what he gets away with, but I mean, I've been around sports a long time. Some guys do, some guys don't. I'll be honest. He is in a lot of ways the face of the NHL. You watch these games, he's on the commercials lifting the Stanley Cup. And granted, that was the most recent cup winner, but he's kind of the face of the NHL. He gets away with a lot of stuff. In the 90s, no, his dad did not play like Matthew. But I think you said it. It's a different game now. Matthew would have had his head taken off within 10 minutes in the 1990s with the way that he plays. But it's a different game now. You can play that way and not really have to answer for it. Right? Yeah. And I personally enjoy him. Serena can't stand him. Now, she wanted to explain herself because a couple of weeks ago on the show, she said she hates him because he's a former Calgary Flame, and that's all. And I'm like, well, that's silly. That's why you'll never be a GM of a team. And afterwards, she's like, well, he also doesn't respect the game. He doesn't play it right. I'm like, well, you should have said that because you're right. Yeah. There's no grabbing David Pastrnak and beating the shit out of him last year. That's not honoring the game. And to be honest, when that happened, Pastrnak was down and Tkachuk gave him another one. And I was watching Bruce Boudreau on the NHL Network going, that's not supposed to be able to do that. Like, why is Matthew Tkachuk allowed to get away with this? So, but I don't lose any sleep over it because there's no answer. If you went and asked the NHL, why does he get away with this? Why does he get to hit Gensel, a puckless Gensel, which to me was, well, you and I had a little back and forth on Twitter about that. You said they weren't the same, and they weren't the same. I think Tkachuk's was worse. I do.
You may be right. You may be right on that.
He didn't even have a hearing, let alone a suspension, and I don't know why that is. But who cares? I don't care. But I'm sure the Lightning are very pissed off about it.
Oh, I'm sure too. And well, you know what I thought was real ironic was they were showing clips on with Messier and Subban, and then they were showing some clips of Messier and some of his hits. Okay, and I mean some of these. I mean, back in the day when Mark Messier was playing, okay, his elbow was flying everywhere, and it was in everybody's head. Okay, there was no there was no question about that. And PK himself, okay, he didn't get the nickname Slewfoot for nothing. Okay. And I'll tell you what, I was at the game when he slew footed Jordan Stahl and he ended Jordan Stahl's season when Jordan was playing with the Penguins. I was at that game. I was, wow. And it was just, I had no words after that game for what happened. But, okay. And like we said, we're at a different time, a different era. This is the way things are. But I agree with your point. Now, what I thought was interesting was Hagel had a press conference, and I don't know if you watched any of his press conference, and what he had to say afterwards. And it's really kind of like, okay, well, poor me, I was hit, but then it was really kind of a double standard kind of a thing, really kind of real hypocritical. So I knocked one of your guys out, and then I got hit. Woe is me, kind of thing. And I'm like, it's a two-way street here, guys. What is all this? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I saw the quotes. I didn't watch the news conference, but I got the gist of what he was saying with that. And I mean, let's just walk this back. It's a hell of a lot of fun for guys like you and me to talk about, but we can't compare Mark Messier's era to now. Totally different leagues. What it was then and what it is now. Just is. PK Subban was always dirty, but guess what? He's also the face of ESPN. So clearly they didn't have a problem. And if the NHL had a problem with Subban, he wouldn't be on ESPN. I didn't like the way he played either. I don't like him at all. But to be honest, I think his analysis is pretty damn good. He's really growing on me. The only issue I had was him wearing tracksuits and goofy outfits to the rink, but now he's at least wearing a suit and tie. But back, you asked me about Hagel. I like Brandon Hagel. Was it look at it from his perspective? That's how he felt. He's always been a pretty honest player. And to be honest, if we hopefully in this discussion get down to the Battle of Florida talk and where this rivalry's at, let's not forget Hagel and Tkachuk fought at the start of that round robin game for the Four Nations face-off that people are still talking about. To be honest, I'm glad that Hagel had the benefit of almost 24 hours after the end of the season to talk, but I'm sure he was still emotional about it. And if you look at it from his perspective, I'd probably be pissed off too. Doesn't mean that we need to agree with him. Like, back to Tkachuk, Paul Maurice was asked about this going into the playoffs, about what a pain in the ass Tkachuk is. And Maurice goes, well, when I was in Winnipeg and he was in Calgary, I didn't like him either. But now we're on the same team.
Oh, yeah.
So it flips 180. Just depends what side of the cookie you're on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I agree with that. And that was a great statement to bring up from Paul, because I remember him saying that, and I watched that press conference with him, and he's the pain in the ass that you want to have on your side. Okay.
Yes.
And I know that's also been said about Brad Marchand. He's the pain in the ass that you want to have on your side and playing for you. But going back to round one, I know we kind of dipped our toes in some other stuff, but going back to round one, the games were, each game I thought was a little different. All right. And I know Paul said, and it really kind of took a lot of people back, but like game one where they won, it was resounding. I mean, there was no contest, a 6-2 game. It's just, I never really got a feel for how we were playing in that game. And I'm like, okay, I'm sitting back there and I'm listening to Paul. I said, you know what? This guy plays 4-dimensional chess. All right. He's like 2 moves ahead of everybody else, Paul Maurice. I mean, you say what you will about Coop, and I think Coop's a great coach. Okay. I just think Paul Maurice is just light years ahead of almost every other NHL coach because of his strategy, because he thinks so far ahead into the game. Okay. And I'm like, well, what didn't you like about game one, Paul? I mean, I'm like, 6-2 and everything. And then they come in game two, and it's like, it's such a tight affair, that whole game. I mean, it was nip and tuck that whole game. And I'm going to call that Sergei Bobrovsky's game, because if it wasn't for him, they would not have won that game two. Okay. I think game three, it just, they came in, and I think, your emotions, you're pumped up, you're in front of the home crowd and everything. And I kind of think with game 3, I kind of think they kind of like just fell a little flat. All right. They just weren't there emotionally. Game 4, they brought it back into focus. It's those 2 goals, 11 seconds apart for both teams. I don't think that's a first in the league history. That's never happened before. And then we all know what happened in game 5. But I think, each game was kind of different.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. Obviously I'm always a Bob fan. It was fun. I was on some Lightning fan podcasts going into the series, and we did a breakdown position by position. They took Vazzy, I took Bob. Surprise, surprise. But Vasilevsky there was hardly any games in this series that he was even good.
Yeah.
Right? You mentioned game 2, Bob had the shutout for sure, and he earned it. But the goal that was the game winner in game 2 was the Nate Davis slap shot from the right point. Vasilevsky saw a clear lane of it. He was not screened. It was not tipped. That was the game winner. Low stick side. I was a goalie, Bill. And to be honest, I say once a goalie, always a goalie. That's the toughest shot to stop. It is very hard to stop, but still, you're Andrei Vasilevsky. He just wasn't that good in the entire series. And to be honest, I'm disappointed by that, because I wanted to see the battle of the 2 greatest Russian goalies of all time, save for Vladislav Tretiak, but he never played in the NHL. These are the 2 greatest Russian NHL goalies of all time, and it wasn't even close.
Oh, no, it wasn't. And, I was like you. I was shocked. I'm like, that went in? I'm like, you got to be kidding me. He makes that save all day long and twice on Sunday. I mean, I'm like, and you were right. Okay. He was not himself that whole series. I mean, he let in some, what I would call some bad goals. There was a couple that trickled in like that. And I'm like, that's not the vintage Vasilevsky that we're accustomed and used to seeing. And it's like, I'll go to this. He plays lights out during the regular season, and it's kind of like, I call it the Winnipeg Jets syndrome. Okay, they play lights out during the regular season, and then come the playoffs, it's like you don't know what you're going to get. All right, and it's like, for some reason, I think we're seeing the decline of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and it's like, did they do the right things in the offseason? I think they did. I think they bolstered themselves really well. I think Gensel was an excellent signing. Okay. They have probably one of the best players in the NHL in Kucherov. Victor Hedman is still a great player. They have a Vezina candidate for in Vasilevsky. And what happened, and I think we touched on it earlier, it's with that heart and that soul. But I think, as a whole, they try to get the Panthers off their game. All right. And I noticed that in the series, and Coop will do that. That's kind of his strategy. But, if the Panthers stick to their game, and they make it hard to get into the zone like they typically do, like Maurice likes to preach, they'll shut down almost any team in the league. And that's exactly what ended up happening with Tampa. I mean, they clogged that up so much, okay, that entries into the offensive zone were like almost next to impossible for them, especially going to the later couple of games in the series.
Well, I couldn't believe the shot totals in the games were sub 20 for both teams in most games.
Yeah.
So these were defensive games, but I can appreciate defensive games. And to be honest, going into the playoffs, Tampa scored the most goals in the regular season, and then just got blanked in the playoffs, including Nikita Kucherov. You tell me, how do you go from being the Art Ross Trophy winner to not scoring a playoff goal in 15 games? Like, it doesn't make any sense, but he hasn't, but let's just remember, the Lightning were in the Stanley Cup the Stanley Cup final 2020, 2021, 2022, and won 2 Stanley Cups. And that, the whole idea was they were getting the band back together. And the NHL was trumpeting the fact there were 8 members of those teams on this year's team once they reacquired Yanni Gourde and reacquired Ryan McDonough. That's why I wasn't willing to sleep on them. I mean, these are still the Tampa Bay Lightning. And when you go to their arena, it's hard not to get pumped up for the games and respect that franchise. That's a hockey town. But when you say Andrei Vasilevsky wasn't himself, I'm sitting here going, what is he now? At one time, he was the king. I don't think we're going to see that anymore. And I'm sitting here, I pretty much can guarantee you the Lightning know what happened to them. but I don't know what happened to them. Just going into the playoffs, the NHL on TNT panel all had Tampa Bay Lightning, Tampa Bay Lightning, Tampa Bay Lightning to win this series and go to the Stanley Cup final. So you can sit here and talk about all the injuries you want, Lightning. You were the hottest team down the stretch that allowed you to have a 100-point season and overtake the Panthers for second. So what are you?
They were regular season. They were blowing people out, Rod. I mean, it was like,
how do you change so fast?
Yeah, it's like, and I call it again. I hate to use the Jets as an example. The Winnipeg Jets syndrome. You play lights out during the regular season, and then hit the playoffs, and it's just like you can't get that car started. You can't get that engine turned over, and it was just so apparent again this year with them. And it just, I don't know. Really, truly, to be honest with you, I think the mindset that Paul Maurice has in coming in what he did with coasting into the playoffs and trying to rest these people, is, I think, a mindset that I think a lot of other coaches are going to take a serious look at, because of, the Panthers came out, they were ready to go game one. Okay. Up in Tampa. They were ready to go. They weren't sitting back. They were pushing it from the start, which obviously, which is something that they needed to do. But one of the things I think also helped them win that series was their penalty kill. What was it? I think they killed 15 out of 17 chances. Tampa only scored twice on the power play. That was amazing.
Yeah, and look at the talent that they have, right? It's, Point, Gensel, Kucherov, Hedman. And, to me, I didn't actually look at the penalty kill power play stats. I should have. We often said the greatest penalty killer is the goalie. And that goes back to Bob, who, hands down won the goaltending battle in this series. I'm just a little like you. It's back-to-back years where the Lightning they just didn't show up in the playoffs, and that's when you're supposed to do it. But, it really annoyed me. You said you watched our podcast this week, the media trying to purport this series that John Cooper had coached his last game. I wasn't even out of the arena Thursday night or Wednesday night, and that was on my phone. That is John Cooper's future in jeopardy. I'm glad they came out. It's sad they had to address it on Thursday and to clarify that he will be back. But yeah, look, I'll say it again. I'm sure the Lightning know what happened to them, but they're not saying, and I can't pinpoint what it was other than the Florida outright domination. And you bring up Paul Maurice's strategy down the stretch. In the NBA, they called it load management, and everybody whines and bitches about it for good reason. Here, the Panthers, for the last month, 2 months, if you include Tkachuk, did not play their full lineup, and nobody said a blinking word about it. Nobody cared. But I'll say near the end of the regular season, Buffalo was here on a Saturday. I didn't go. Serena went. Barkov wasn't playing. Reinhart wasn't playing. A bunch of guys weren't playing. I'm like, if the Panthers don't care, I don't care. And I didn't go. Because I knew it was very clear they were resting up for the playoffs. And I didn't see a lot of criticism of that. Some media were, but who cares what they think?
Yeah. Yeah. And just to touch on another point on round one, Vasilevsky had that back surgery, what was it, a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago. And then the season after he came back, he was not at his best, and I can't help but think, and this is something I talked about with one of my other friends who follows the teams, talked about, and just said, I can't help but think, I think that still kind of affects his play, because something just seems to be a little bit off. And I think, scoring a lot of goals can cover a multitude of sins, as one of my friends has said. And I think a lot of the season, we were focused on Tampa's offense, with Gensel and Kucherov and Point. I mean, the multi 20 goal scorers that they have and everything. And we weren't focusing so much on Vass, even though he's a Vezina candidate. All right. But you have to remember, and I think, and one of my other friends who puts it so well, he says, you have to remember how the Panthers are built versus how the Bolts are built. Okay. The Bolts are a regular season team. They're built for the regular season. They're built to excel, and they do. And they excel in the regular season. And of course, you need to excel in the regular season to get a shot at the playoffs. That's taken for granted. Okay. But the Panthers are built for the playoffs. Okay. And it's a different mindset with the Panther organization. Okay. You're going from Breesbaugh and Cooper and everything and what they do in Tampa, which nobody really has any argument with because they put a winning team out there. And like you said, I went to a game this year against San Jose. They won like 8-1 or something like that. I mean, it wasn't even a contest, but it's an electric atmosphere in there. No pun intended. I mean, they got it going there. I mean, they know what they're doing. And, and here we are with the Panthers. Okay. Now we have round 2 coming up with Toronto. Okay. And I've already gotten a big kick out of seeing Paul Bissonnette, and he put a little video together, and I'm just sitting there and I just put the laugh emoticon all the way on there because it's just like, I am just laughing so hard about all that. Now I put a poll out on X, and my poll was, I think I had over 200 people participate. 96% pick the Panthers to beat the Maple Leafs. What are your thoughts heading into the series against the Leafs?
I wrote a column that's in the South Florida Tribune today breaking down the series. It's going to be a long series. I think 7 games. I picked the Panthers in 7. I'm glad that you didn't get sucked in by Biznasty on his video. I didn't see too many that did, but as you know, Panthers fans, it takes about this much to trigger them. And it's usually that whole 6 fans, or as Biz said, you're 27 fans. Oh my God. He's just trolling, and it's going to be fun to see the Leafs lose again. But I love going into playoff series and breaking it down. And I'll ask you this: the edge in goal is not close. Sergei Bobrovsky versus Anthony Stolarz, please.
Oh, yeah.
That's the master versus the student. I mean, eventually the student overtakes the master. Not this year.
Not this year.
If we want to talk about defense, I got to give it to the Leafs. Morgan Rielly, number 1, would be the best defenseman in the series. Oliver Ekman-Larsson is now a Leaf after being a Panther last year. Chris Tanev, the Leafs have the edge on the blue line. I should stop. Who do you give the check marks to? Goaltending and blue line.
Goaltending, no question. Bob gets it all day long and twice on Sunday. Okay, because I've watched enough Leaf games this year. It's just like Stolarz just seems to collapse near end of games. I mean, it's like he has a breakdown and just he can't stop a beach ball near the end of a game. The defense, I'm gonna go neutral on that. I think both teams are pretty even as far as that's concerned, as far as the blue line is concerned. So yeah, I'm gonna call that a draw.
Well, if anybody, If there's going to be a wash, to me, it's not that, but I will allow it. And I may even use it coming up in one of my categories here. And then at forward, I love me some Alexander Barkov and some Sam Reinhart and all that gang, Sam Bennett. I do. But you got to go with the Leafs again. Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, Max Domi, Matthew Nyes. They were built for this. I know the Panthers were too, and they're the reigning Stanley Cup champions, but you got to pick one. And to me, the Leafs have the edge at forward.
Seeing the way the Panthers were against the Lightning, and rolling out 3, almost even 4 lines that were just devastating. I mean, and the Lightning had their hands full. I mean, with almost every one of those lines every time they were on the ice. One of the things I think I was a little disappointed in the series against the Lightning is I think Reinhart was a little on the quiet side. Didn't really see a lot from him. Barkov was okay, but I think, granted, he did get hit that one game, so I'm kind of giving him a pass. Bennett kind of picked things up. Okay, I was pretty impressed with that. And some of the people that I think are a little too quiet in the forward department for the Panthers. I think Verhaeghe. I think Maurice has said time and time again that that his time to shine is in the big games, and we saw a little blip of it against the Lightning, but I think he really needs to pick things up. I think Evan Rodriguez has disappeared. He's almost like in the mist, in the vapor, and like, where is he? Because he was such a key ingredient in 2024. So I will say I would agree with you there, only for the fact that Reinhart's been a little too quiet. Some of the other guys have just gone into the vapor, and I haven't really seen them or heard from them.
Okay, well, you said you were parting ways with me. So are you agreeing with me, or are you not agreeing?
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm sorry. I meant to say I was agreeing with you.
You said you were parting ways with me on that. So
yeah. I don't know what I had.
I'm
I didn't
hanging
have
on
enough
your every
caffeine
word.
this
I'm
morning.
hanging on your every word, Bill. So
I didn't have
that's
enough caffeine this morning, Rod. But no, I agree with you. I think I think the Leafs have the edge as far as forwards are concerned. I think what's going to do it here for them, and it's a cliche, and they talk about it. All the TBS and ESPN crew will talk about it again. Is special teams and the penalty kill and on the power play. And the Panthers have got to pick up the power play. All right. I know they love to put on passing clinics during power plays, and nothing frustrates a fan or a podcaster more is seeing them, they're passing tape to tape on the blue line or against the boards. And, we all know their MO, they want to deflect shots in the net. Okay. Because as a former goalie, one of the toughest saves to make is a deflection shot. I mean, you see it coming and then it goes in another direction and you can't get there. And I think that's the thing that's going to be a key for them is taking advantage of these power play opportunities. Penalty kill, I don't worry about them at all. Power play, yeah, they need to convert some of these power plays instead of putting on these passing clinics.
Goaltending and special teams decide playoff series, always have, always will, and that's why I get so pissed off when I see the analytic nerds talking about 5-on-5 stats, and from time to time coaches. I'm like, who gives a shit? That is not what's deciding the series. Okay, but whatever. If it gives you a talking point, go ahead. So again, we've given the Panthers the check mark in goal. I've given the Leafs the check mark on the blue line. You called it a wash. I've given the Leafs the check mark at forwards, as have you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then coaching. If I were to take a Bill Panthers Fan Den podcast approach, I would say it's a wash. But I don't like to do that. I like to pick a side. So I'll say Paul Maurice over Craig Berube, but it's really, really, really close. They both have Stanley Cups on their resume. Palmo's got all the wins, but he's been doing it a lot longer. I'll give Paul the credit. But Berube's done some pretty good things this year, Bill. Let's not forget.
I agree. I agree.
They finished first in the Atlantic. That's a very tough division.
I agree. I no questions asked. He had when he went in and took this job. I think he knew what he was up for. Okay. And it was going to be a dogfight for the whole season. And I think he's done extremely well because, as you know, and I don't have to tell you this, okay, the media will crucify whoever is head coach in Toronto. Okay. They will just rake him over the coals if he's not winning. All right. And he's put a winning product out on the ice. He's gotten these players to buy into his system and the way he does it. And I'll agree with you. Okay. I think Paul Maurice gets the edge only slightly here. I think the Panthers are going to do it in 6, not 7, to be honest with you. I think they'll win game 6 back in Sunrise, and there'll be no game 7. It's going to be nip and tuck the whole series. You're not going to see these 6-2 blowouts. I can just about guarantee you that. You're going to see 3-2, 4-3, 2-1 kind of games here because it's going to be a battle. You're going to have to claw for goals. I mean, especially also too, like you talked about with the last series against the Lightning, some of those games, not even eclipsing 20 shots a game. I mean, wow. I mean, that's like almost unheard of, but I think you're right. Okay. I think you're going to see it. You're probably going to see again, something like that. I don't think that, they don't give each other a lot of room out on the ice. And I think it's going to be the same way here. Like I said, I agree with you. I think it's going to be 6, and I think the Panthers are going to do it in 6.
I think I've said Panthers in 7, but I'll say this: watching the Ottawa-Toronto series, Toronto is different this time around. They're confident. They don't look scared or nervous like they did even 2 years ago when they met the Panthers in round 2. Panthers cleaned their clock in 5 games. Toronto's battle tested. I don't know if you're a believer or how religious you are, Bill, but when God wanted to make David a king, he put Goliath in front of him. Before you get anointed, you face the challenge. And the Leafs have faced the challenges. This could be their year. There's an X factor in this. We've talked about goaltending, blue line, forwards, coaching. The X factor is desire and hunger. Panthers checked that in every series last year. The Leafs might be hungrier. I'm not joking. And you talk about the media being up the ass of the Leafs. You're right. They hear about that drought every single day. And I'm pretty sure they're tired of hearing about it. That's a factor, I believe, going into a series.
Well, and I'll kind of wrap things up with this. And I'm sure you've seen this video of the crowds after a game. And I think they were getting on the subway in Toronto. We want Florida. We want Florida. All right. And my late great father had a saying, which I always have adhered to, is be careful what you wish for. Okay.
Oh yeah. Wise guy.
Yeah. He was the wisest guy I ever knew on the face of this planet, Rod. Be careful what you wish for. And, you're wishing for this. I still think, conversely, I think the Panthers are as or even more hungry. And I think, I don't know who it was who they talked to about this. It may have been Reinhardt or Bennett or Tkachuk. I'm not real sure, but I saw an interview and one of them said, now that we have a taste of it, we want it again, and we want it again very badly. So, I think that desire is equally as there for the Panthers. So it's going to be a nip and tuck series. It's going to be, we're going to measure progress in inches, not feet. It's going to be this kind of series because it's going to be nip and tuck the whole way.
Well, I wouldn't discount the Panthers' hunger either. I wouldn't. There's a documentary. I'm not sure if you've ever watched it, but if you haven't, you'd love it. Boys on the Bus, on the Oilers, on the 80s Oilers. And Kevin Lowe was interviewed in it. You got to watch it, Bill. It's on YouTube. Boys on the Bus. You'll be fascinated. And Kevin Lowe goes, once you win that every year, you start to think it's yours, right? And you don't want to give it up. So I get the mentality, but it's just the Leafs. There's so much pressure on them. The last few years, I've watched them closely in the playoffs, and they've succumbed to it. And they just seem this year to be different. That's why I think it's going to be a long series, and it's going to be a hell of a series.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot of hard hits, and and I hope, and I'm going to kind of wrap things up here with this is, I'm hoping that we can have a hard hitting series, but a smart hard hitting series. Not have these Aaron Ekblad and Mikkola, and Tkachuk kind of hits where they're questionable, and especially for Ekblad. He still has another game that he suspended because of his hit and Mikkola's hit, and also Hagel as well too on Barkov. I'm hoping that we can have some smart and hard hitting series here coming up.
Yeah, the Leafs don't have anybody that plays that way, and I don't say that as an insult. They don't have a meathead. Max Domi, other than Max Domi, he'd be like the only guy, and he hasn't done it since he's been in Toronto. Like Ryan Reeves isn't playing. So it's not going to be that kind of series.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's where we're at with this. So thank you so much for stopping by today, Rod. We appreciate it. Appreciate all you and Serena do. You guys really earn the #1 hockey podcast in the state of Florida. You guys,
thank you, man.
Rock it every week. And by the way, love you guys doing it live now. I think that's awesome. I think that's fantastic.
It's a big change. People seem to like it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing real good. I always have to watch it on replay because I'm in the middle of my work day. So that's kind of that. But I faithfully watch it, and as should everybody out there. They should watch you guys because you guys are the best, and you have some incredible guests on there as well. As always, guys, it's a great day for Panthers hockey. Time to hunt.